never boring. Here we go with Jakpa Stories.
Welcome to another episode of Jakpa Stories, the podcast where every story inspires another. Today on the podcast, I have a guest that we've been looking forward to speaking to, and I'm going to switch over to him to introduce himself. If you were to introduce yourself to those who don't know you, how would you introduce yourself?
Okay, my name is Ene Tawo, fondly known as Ene or Ene Boy by my very close friends. I'm Nigerian born, Riverians, dad, cross Riverian, mom, Rivers. And I'm a fun-loving person. Anyone who meets me, that impression they get because I'm just like that, I'm a people's person. Yeah. So
You absolutely are a people's person.
yeah.
And then welcome to Jakpa Stories.
Thank you very much.
I personally know you and call you the social connector.
Yes.
And
that's who I am.
it's a pleasure having you on Jakpa Stories today.
Oh, actually, the pleasure is all mine. Thank you very much. Yeah.
So, Jakpa, that's what we're here to talk about. So, when you hear the word Jakpa, what does that mean to you?
I mean, literally, Jakpa means like to run or run away. I don't think I've ever sat down to, think or ask which tribe that word emanates from, right? But I mean, it's like a slang, it's like a streets language, back in Nigeria, Jakpa, because we're fond of, infusing our local dialect into, English or even, pidgin English, broken English, And so Jakpa will be, to flee from an unpleasant situation. And in this sense, Jakpa for a lot of Nigerians, I mean, I'll speak mostly to, the country I am originally from. It's a flight to a place, of greener pastures and opportunities. Yeah. So that's what it means to me. Yeah.
So, fleeing or taking off and seeking greener pastures, so to
Exactly
say.
where it is. Yeah.
I like that. Now, let's go back a couple of years for you.
Yeah.
Let's go back memory lane.
Memory lane.
So, when you think about yourself, so for those who don't know you, where are you originally from?
Okay, so I'm from Nigeria.
Okay.
Born, raised in Nigeria, and left Nigeria when I was 27 years old. So I was already a full-blown man. Life had already, started for me. I was already working, and yeah.
Okay. So you left Nigeria 27. And so we go back to, back to school, right?
Yeah.
So I would say like elementary, high school,
Yeah.
university, you did all of that in Nigeria.
Yes. And then
Okay.
obviously when I, moved out, I did more schooling. Yeah.
Okay.
in,
And did you start
Canada.
working in Nigeria before you eventually left at some point? or-
Absolutely, yeah. So I would say my journey was an interesting one. Fortunate, in that sense.
Yeah.
Graduated from the university. Actually, I went to the University of Calabar, widely known as UNICAL,
Yeah.
and graduated.
Shout out to all the Unical folks out there, because I know you guys have.
Malabites. yeah, we're called Malabites.
Okay.
Right? Yeah. So left school. Obviously, didn't get a job, immediately, but it took me just about less than a year, to get a job. But which I started off, working with the chairman of a local government, area in Bayelsa State. And then I got into Ajip. So it's an oil and gas company in Nigeria, Nigerian Ajip Oil and Gas Company, where I worked for a couple of years. And then the rest is history. Yeah.
So at what point did you decide that you know what, I think I'm done with, whatever I have to do
Yeah.
in Nigeria at this point, and I want a way out. At what point did that happen to you, or was it growing up? Has that always been in your mind, or was there a particular event that happened that made you think, you know what, I think this is it, I'm done.
Yeah. So interestingly, I was never that kid who nursed the ambition to leave Nigeria.
Okay.
In fact, I can't think of any of my siblings who, had that mindset because not saying that it was all rosy for us, but then we were for the most part, privileged kids. Although we had a very strict father
Yeah.
who taught us that life was not a bed of, or life is not a bed of roses. Also, he had this particular phrase that not abundance that maketh rich, but economy.
Interesting.
And what that means, initially we didn't understand it. We just thought, dad was mean and all of that. As
Thought it was just dropping some nuggets for you guys.
yes, and we just thought he was. I mean, to put it like plainly, we thought he was mean, right?
Yeah.
But he was trying to teach us, to be ambitious, and work hard for the things we wanted. And over time, as we grew up, we understood it. And looking back, I would say, that kind of, formed the way, I am today, as well as my siblings. I believe some of your viewers may have, seen, a couple of my siblings
Yeah.
here, talking about, their journey, Jakpa, and all of that. Yeah. So back to the question, I was never really, yeah, I never, lost the ambition to leave Nigeria. I'd, traveled a couple times because we have family, all over the world, and that's a blessing, right? The idea to leave Nigeria was it was given to me by the woman I was dating at the time.
Okay.
Yeah, so her mom literally pushed her out of Nigeria. Yeah.
So what was the first place that you guys went to? Was it Canada straight, or was it the US or UK? Where did you guys go
so
to
it
first
was
of all?
it was the UK, London specifically.
Okay,
Yes.
okay.
Yes. So so my girlfriend at the time, had gotten a work permit, in the UK. And then, because we were very close, like she was my friend, right? So she didn't want to lose that friendship. And you know what distance can do to
Oh, yeah.
relationships, right?
Yeah.
So she literally pushed me to apply for the same work permit. At that time, it was called HSMP, Highly Skilled Migrant Program.
Okay.
And because I was already working then, I had, the work experience, education to back it up, I had to. So it was easy for me to put the documents together and fulfill the checklist, meet the criteria. And so that's how, my journey, out of Nigeria started. It came through, and obviously, we joined up there, in London. We lived together. And then after a couple years, we moved to Canada. Yeah.
Okay. So you moved to London first of all, and you said that was like over
That was in 2008.
almost
Yeah.
2008.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that was 17
That's
years
quite
ago.
a
Yeah.
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 That's quite a while ago. That's
Yeah,
really
that's a long
really
time.
going down memory
Yeah,
lane.
yeah. But it still feels like yesterday because I remember everything. Though. Yeah, yeah.
So and how long were you guys in London?
About 3 years.
Oh, 3 years. Okay.
Yes, and so it was. People have different experiences living in the UK, but mine was quite enjoyable. Again,
Okay.
of course, it wasn't the rosiest, but then I am someone who's very optimistic and open-minded. So I like to take things as they come, And even when I'm in a maybe like a challenging situation, I try to see the blessings, within, and pick the dangling fruits from them, and turn them into, I would say, a
It's
smoothie, or
almost like
yeah,
when you get lemons, you
you make lemonade.
lemonade out of it.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah.
So the UK, London, great experience for 3 years.
Yes.
And after that, uh, was there a particular event that made you guys want to leave London to move? And how did
Yeah.
Canada even come in the picture?
Yes,
I think that's even where I'm going.
exactly. I know.
Like, why not other countries? Why not
Countries,
the US?
yes.
Why not
Yes.
Australia and other places? Why? How did Canada come in the picture?
So I had a brother, my immediate older brother,
Okay.
who's an airline captain and a training, captain. So he was living in Canada at the time, and we were very close. Like, again, we're close in age. Growing up, people would ask our mom if we were twins. Yeah, because it's just 2 years between us, right?
Yeah.
So he was living in Canada at the time, and it was just him and his family. Then it was him, his wife, and I'm trying to remember if the second kid had arrived then. I think, yeah, 2 kids.
Okay.
Excuse me. And so he kept asking me to move to Canada. As a matter of fact, he wasn't particularly happy, when I told him that I was moving to the UK. So he was
So
like,
before you guys moved to the UK, he was already in Canada.
he was already in Canada.
Okay.
Yeah.
So naturally, he would have expected you to
Yes.
put Canada in your
Right.
your destination.
Yes.
Your destination.
In fact, that should have been
And London came in the
only
only destination.
destination, right? But again, like I said, I was never that kid who ever harbored the thought of, relocating from Nigeria, right? And anyway, my brother, so he kept, pushing, and he did something quite radical. He traveled to the UK. He came to visit me
Okay.
in I forget the year now. I think it was 2009. He came, and even spoke to my fiance at the time. So the same girl, we had gotten engaged, and so he spoke to her because she had quite some experience with immigration and entry clearance, approvals, because prior to leaving Nigeria, she worked with the British High Commission.
Okay.
Yes.
So naturally, she had a lot
Yeah,
of
so
experience with
absolutely, yeah.
how things work at the embassy.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
stuff like that.
So he spoke to her. My brother is super wise. God blessed him with a lot of wisdom. So he spoke to her and he said, "Look, I want you to push this thing, because I know that if I leave it to Ene, or if you leave it to Ene, he's not going to do it." So knowing that she had the experience with that, and of course, women are more, or tend to be more assertive than men. Sometimes we can just be relaxed, or chill, whatever.
Yep.
So, and then, so she spoke to me about it. I'm like, okay, yeah, okay, you can, kick it off, okay, so what do we need to do? So before my
So
brother left,
you were in 100% in support of it.
initially
Or
I was like,
you're a bit
I was
resistive.
indifferent.
Okay, you're
I was,
indifferent.
yes,
Okay,
I
that's-
didn't resist
I
it.
think
though.
that's a better word.
Yes. I was indifferent to it.
Okay.
Right. So I would say I was just, comfortable. Yeah. And so before my brother left, we went online and typed how to, immigrate to Canada. And then so he found the stream that best suited, our circumstances, and then passed it on to us. So me and my fiance at the time, and then we took it from there, printed out the checklist, and then followed the process. Right,
Okay.
I did everything ourselves, and
And was that through Express Entry or
it was
it
through the
different,
so very good, so because this will be very beneficial to some of the people looking to move to Canada who
Yeah.
don't know. So at the time, my brother was living in Winnipeg, in the province of Manitoba, and so we found a stream called the Manitoba Provincial Nominee Program, the family stream.
Okay.
So I applied, through, because what that does is, when you have a close relative like a direct sibling, then I don't know what it is today. I don't pay attention to the immigration stuff today. But back then, if you had a sibling or a cousin, and you could prove that relationship, right? Through birth certificates and all of that, which shows,
You're connected to the person.
Yeah, through parents.
yeah.
Yes. So, and then you have the educational qualification as well as work experience. Then you had a very strong case. Yeah. So however, we didn't put in that application, because it's not something you do overnight, right? So you have to gather your documents, get them notarized, reach out to your school to, get your transcripts sent over to, like me, I was able to gather all that information. I was working in the UK, I had worked in Nigeria, I schooled in Nigeria, and all of that, put all that together. And obviously, as well as hers, even though she, was my dependent, on that application,
Yeah.
so provide a very strong case, we ensured that we both, had all our, met the criteria and
Yeah.
qualifications,
Okay.
they needed. And so again, we did not put in the application until the following year, 2010, right? Because
Why the delay?
gathering documents.
Okay, just
sometimes
the time to get
yeah,
like all the
sometimes I will
documents
say,
and stuff.
demotivation. You understand, right? Because, and my brother, of course, was following up and all of that. And then when we got so after we sent in the application, and then, so he was the correspondence, right? You get, so a lot of the correspondences went through my brother, since he was more or less the sponsor.
Yeah.
So it became, I would say, we're now sure that, okay, yeah, this thing was going to come to fruition when, we received the first response from, the Canadian Immigration, and Citizenship Services or whatever.
Okay.
And so through my brother, forwarded that email to say, okay, they had received our
Everything was
application.
confirmed.
They had received the application, and the next step was to apply for do medical or whatever. You get that. Okay, this is for real, right? And the rest is history.
So that was when you guys believed that, this thing is actually possible.
Yes.
So naturally, I would imagine with your brother being in Manitoba that you guys would have moved directly to Manitoba when you were coming in.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So, because that's where you have family, that's where support is.
Absolutely, yeah.
And for a lot of folks who are coming in, soft landing for sure.
Right.
Do you remember the month when you guys came in?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So it was approved in I think towards the end of 2010. It was only like a 7 month process, right?
Okay.
Yeah. And interestingly, then I didn't have to. I was the principal applicant. So I didn't have to write IELTS, even though it was a requirement, right? I was able to prove to them that my language of learning and communication all my life was English. I was working in the UK at the time, but and that is because then it wasn't. I would say it wasn't enforceable, because I know today people come from English speaking countries.
Right now it's so different,
and must prove their English literacy,
the proficiency.
Or proficiency, through the
Well,
IELTS. Yes,
that's good to know. So you didn't write IELTS? Yes.
No, I did not. I did not. But this was this was back then when, as long as you met the criteria, right? You'd get
They weren't putting too much emphasis on,
Yeah.
or was it more you could prove that, your education, working and everything was in
in
English.
English, yes. And the English language is the only language that I understand and can speak fluently.
Yeah.
Right. Because our own local dialect, I understand a bit of it.
Well, you
I
couldn't
cannot.
speak.
I can't really speak it. English language and Pidgin English,
Yeah.
which is a street language in Nigeria. Most of us can, can speak that.
Very well.
Yeah.
It's almost like anytime they wake you up from sleep, and if it's
Oh, yeah.
pidgin straight up.
Yeah, straight up,
And-
because
and
it comes
English.
naturally. So because that's just a twisted version of English, right?
Yeah.
So it comes naturally to us, yeah.
So when you guys landed in Manitoba, was there any culture shock, like just arriving and seeing? I mean, I would imagine coming from UK, from London.
Yeah.
London is a beautiful city. So, and from my own lens,
Yeah.
London is a lot more
Metropolitan
of a metropolitan city compared to Winnipeg.
to Winnipeg.
So what was your first expression when you landed and and saw the difference?
I asked my brother, "Na Canada be this?" I'm like, "Is this Canada for real?" So that was because growing up back in Nigeria,
Yeah.
we lived in big cities. I grew up in first early years, Lagos State, Lagos, Port Harcourt,
Yeah.
Calabar, and then even Abuja, where my girl came from, right?
Yeah.
You get and then London. Then so to move, it was such a culture shock for me that Canada had a place, because first of all, I knew nothing about Canada. I did not carry out a lot of research, which I think a lot of people make that mistake, right? In hindsight, I should have researched more, because maybe I wouldn't have stayed in Winnipeg as long as I did, or not.
How many years were you in Winnipeg?
I did I stayed in Winnipeg for 3 years though.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
But then
I mean, not too bad.
life was good. I did very well in Winnipeg.
Yeah.
Because I had a very soft landing. And that's very important. So, aside the culture shock of coming to Manitoba, which was not as I would say vibrant, and glamorous like London, right? We had a very soft landing. My brother, as a matter of fact, from day 2 we started driving, right? So obviously we came with valid driver's
Yeah.
license, right?
And I think back then you could still come with your international
license.
license and then use that for I
yeah.
think for 6 months.
6 months, yeah. So my brother instantly, started, helping us correct those bad habits. Yeah, you get, that's most of us, already, imbibed, growing up, in Africa.
When you
and all of
drive in a city where everybody is always in a hurry to go somewhere,
Yeah.
then you pick up a lot of bad habits.
Oh
for
yeah,
sure.
yeah, big time, yeah.
And it's almost like when you come over here, you have to course correct. You have to delete part of what you already know,
Mm-hmm.
and then you start learning, the correct driving style.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for a lot of people, I mean, my experience as well, like even with the driving thing, I had to take the test a second time,
Okay.
right? Because I felt like the first time I did, like the driving test,
test,
the
yeah.
road test, I felt like the guy just intentionally wanted me to come redo it.
attempt it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so you
again.
don't go out feeling like, oh, I know this thing really
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
I think the second time just humbles you a little bit more.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because we always have this notion, because you've been driving forever, right?
Oh, yeah.
So like you can't teach me anything new, and you see, practicalizing something is way different, than or different from reading the
Yeah.
stuff, right? So
Very true.
you come in, you do the knowledge test, you had read, all the scripts or whatever, but then there's certain things that, and yes, I attempted mine. It was on the second attempt that I
Oh,
passed.
you
And me,
did the
who
second one.
is regarded, who's known as Ene Schumacher.
Yeah.
You get, because I'm a driver, man. But it humbled me because there were certain things like, okay, so when you're approaching an intersection
Yeah.
and you're indicating to turn right, you have to do your mirror signal, maneuver,
Yeah.
you check all of that. Then you want to check to ensure that there is no
no vehicle.
bike.
Okay,
right?
right next to you.
Bike,
Yeah.
bicycle, motorcycle, and all of that. So those were the things that we're checking for. So I think so I missed the points from that. And then, backing in, parallelly into the spots.
Yeah.
I taught the curb and all
Oh.
of that, So again, okay, well, you can touch the curb, but you don't climb it, right? You
Yeah.
get, so all this, so he humbled me, and I think, and for, the people who may be grumbling about, or disgruntled about, the driving tests, process system, right? I think it's important to take it seriously, right? Because it helps you become a great driver, such that even when you go to another country that drives on the wrong side of the road and in the wrong side of the vehicle, you will still, it's still the same principle
Yeah.
of following those good driving ethics on
Right.
the road. Yeah.
Yeah. I know some people have been a bit frustrated with it.
Yeah.
But I think from my perspective, it just helps you pick up those really good habits.
Absolutely.
Which you mentioned, which
Yeah.
after a while it sticks with you and you
becomes
just
second
get
nature.
to keep applying that the best way possible.
Yeah.
So back to Manitoba.
Manitoba, yes.
You landed, you were shocked that was it in terms of how Winnipeg was looking
Yeah.
as a city, and then maybe a part of your mind was comparing that with London, where you're coming from.
Yeah.
I mean, London has been there for hundreds,
Even thousands of years. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I would imagine comparing that with London, like
Yeah.
you definitely not feel like, man, this place is not repping
Yes,
correctly.
it wasn't. And then, even though we came in the spring of
Yeah.
2011, it was nice then in terms of the weather, and then winter came around, and you see, nothing prepares you for that. No matter what, you can only imagine what it is, the intensity of the cold,
Yeah.
until you experience it. And it didn't take long before, I realized, I understood why people call it, Winterpeg Manitoba, right?
Manitoba.
Yeah, like, so we were hitting, negative 40 degrees Celsius, and that was like normal, right? And it's strange because it's all flatland,
Yeah.
and all that. It was brutally cold. However, and this is going back to, how great it was, landing, softly there. What we did was, and my brother encouraged us to do that. He had already prepped my mind, that, okay, prepare to buy a car when you come here. It's not like, because back in London, I drove there, but only when I had to lease a vehicle or drove a friend's car and all that, so we relied heavily on the public transit back in London. But in Winnipeg, the transit, system wasn't as efficient as
I
the
haven't
UK,
been
yeah.
to Winnipeg, but are there like any trains that
Um,
operate, or is it
I'm
just
trying
like
to
the transit
no, so
buses and
so
stuff?
so in Winnipeg, if I can remember correctly, back then there were no public trains.
Okay.
Yeah, so you'd only see CP rail,
CP, which is
the
really more of a
cargo
the
lines,
cargo
right?
type.
Yeah, so people relied on public transit, but I was fortunate not to get on. If I ever got on the bus in Winnipeg, it may have been maybe someone dragging me on there to say, "Hey, come experience it." I'm like, I don't need to experience this because that was my life in the UK, right? So. In a couple of weeks, I think like maybe 2 weeks or so, we went out and bought our own car. Yeah, while still living, with my brother. Yeah, so and then shortly after that, I bought a second car, because we got my my fiancée, whom I later married still, she got a job before me.
Oh,
Yes, yeah,
okay.
and encouraged me because it was a low-hanging fruit. So maybe a lot of people don't know this, but those of you guys, who are close to me know. So I got into the healthcare space. And I'm sure you were coming to that question. Yeah. So I'll just
You've taken it right before I got there.
yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so she got a job first. You guys, literally just kicked things off in Winnipeg.
Yes.
I'm sure at some point you got your own place,
Yeah.
and then when did Calgary come in the picture for you guys?
So Calgary came in the picture because uh, some things happened along the way
Okay,
where so we left Winnipeg, I would say prematurely, because or without a proper plan in place, carrying out research about this next place we were moving to, and that wasn't Calgary, that was Toronto.
well, you
Right.
guys left Winnipeg
Back
to
to
Toronto.
Toronto.
Oh,
Yeah.
this is interesting.
Yes, because while doing our regular jobs, we were like my wife was very enterprising, and so she would always, encourage us to, buy and sell things, which we were doing in the UK.
Yep.
Yeah, so we used to buy cars and send to Nigeria for sale. We'll buy clothes, we'll buy, household, items, send for sale. Yeah, and so one day we're like, okay, we need to, because then it was almost like double, counting, double entry, in accounting terms, right? Where you ship the car to Toronto first before it gets shipped out.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay,
that was
just the
expensive, yeah.
difficulty.
So wanted to cut that out. Yeah, even though of course, I just don't want to go into like details of, what transpired,
Okay.
in between, but
Yeah.
we moved to Toronto, which I thought was premature because in Winnipeg, and this is now going back to, okay, so my my wife straight up went into, like she just focused on, healthcare, providing, services to individuals with, varying disabilities, and mental illnesses.
Yeah.
And while I was chasing all them, blue collar, white collar jobs, white collar jobs, like looking for management, positions like in management, because my background is in finance.
Which was natural because
Natural, right?
you did something similar
Yeah.
in Nigeria,
In
did it
Nigeria,
in London
in
as
the
well.
UK,
So it was very natural to still
yeah.
want
But
the
that
same
wasn't
thing.
coming. So one day she said to me, like, "Hey, this is a low hanging fruit.
And we got bills to pay,
And
man.
naturally, I'm a very hands on person, right? And I have empathy for people.
Yeah.
So she knew that it was something I could do. So I just went and, studied, a bit about, mental disability and all of that. And then I was able to get myself in front of a company for an interview and aced it. And the rest was history. And we went on to not only work for, an agent, like, so I started working with an agency in Winnipeg as a residential and community support,
Okay.
worker. And they quickly identified that I had, good, like management skills. So I became a team leader, became a manager, and my wife too was excelling in that, in that space too.
So both of you were
both of
like
us, yeah. So we
super
were like
focused
on
on
an
health.
upward trajectory,
Yeah.
and then we found an opportunity where we could now provide, services.
Okay.
Yes.
So not just working as
just
healthcare providers, but like having your own
or having our own,
company where you could
company where we
use other people to
exactly.
provide
So
the
so we
services.
became, through an agency, we became contractors with the government of Northern Manitoba.
Okay.
Yes, where we were providing housing, and ensuring that those kids who struggled with drug and alcohol addiction,
Yeah.
and obviously had, varying mental disabilities, were put through school. We put them through school, made sure that their records were updated medically, dental, all of that, and put very nice clothes on their backs, and so that was very, very lucrative back then in Winnipeg.
Yeah.
But then, and obviously we were entrepreneurs as well on the side, buying and selling, things I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
And then made the decision to move to
Toronto.
Toronto, which now changed the course of things. for us,
Okay.
yeah.
So obviously Toronto was a bad decision.
It was I wouldn't say
Or
a
not-
bad
not
decision,
as
but
good
it
as
was
anticipated.
an ill-planned decision.
Okay.
Yes, where we did not realize that Canada is literally fine. It's a country, but this is a continent in itself.
That's
Because
true.
it's massive.
Yeah.
Think about it. It's the second largest country in the world with just 40 million people. At the time, I think it was 34 million
yeah,
people.
it was a lot
back
less,
then, 34, 36 or thereabouts, right?
Yeah.
And so a completely different jurisdiction, and it was hard to settle in Toronto. I was literally surviving. We were literally surviving on our savings.
Wow.
I had to do jobs that I'd never done in my life.
So that's part of I think for a lot of folks who are listening, like what Ene is trying to call out also comes to working as professionals. The fact that you're a professional in one particular state or province doesn't mean you're going to be that same professional in another state or province.
Yeah.
The rules that are guiding the modus operandi within your profession is dependent on the state or the province where you operate. So take, for example, an engineer or a lawyer in BC or Alberta. It doesn't automatically make you an engineer or a lawyer in Ontario. Same thing in the States. If you're moving from Texas and you're going to New York, for example, the fact that you used to practice this particular profession in this state doesn't mean you're recognized in the other state. So it sounds like that's what you guys struggled with,
Yes.
because you were recognized in Manitoba,
yeah.
but you were not necessarily recognized in Ontario.
Ontario.
So-
Even though we had the
experience.
the qualifications
And qualification.
and experience, so that informed our decision, or my decision, to move to Calgary.
Okay. And how
After
long were
1
you
year.
guys in Toronto?
In Toronto,
for?
yeah. So we were in Toronto for about for 1 year.
Okay.
Yeah, for 1
okay.
year, and then and at that time, we had welcomed our son.
Oh.
Yeah. So
So it's like starting up a family,
Yeah.
and then with all of those
challenge-
crazy challenges going
yeah,
on.
Yeah.
So was there a time when all of this was going on that you felt like, did you make the right decision, or you probably even felt like giving up and going back to Nigeria at some point? Walk me through that experience.
Yes.
Or
So
the emotions that you're feeling
Yes.
during that time.
it was a very emotional and challenging time
Yeah.
and experience for us. And as a man with the responsibilities I had at the time, and with what I was used to, right? I had to think. I had to re-strategize. In fact, interestingly, we had already bought tickets to leave Toronto.
Okay.
Already giving a notice to the landlord,
Yeah.
or the property management company that we weren't gonna extend our lease, that we were gonna leave, right?
And that's to leave and
To
go
leave Toronto. Yeah,
Okay.
to leave Toronto, right?
And go to Calgary or go
come,
back to-
come to Calgary.
Okay,
But
okay.
what we did was, we decided, to take a breather go to Nigeria and just, relax for a
Just
bit.
press pause for a little bit.
Yes, yeah. So we did that, and went to Nigeria to, hang out for, a couple of months, just so we can breathe, because it was pretty
Because
choking.
the pressure is
Yeah,
a lot.
it was quite choking, right? At
Yeah.
the time, and then my wife, who had completely, fallen out of love with, Canada.
Yeah.
You
Were you
know,
guys already citizens at that point,
Oh,
or you're
no,
still
no. At that time, no, we weren't citizens at that time.
okay?
Because we were traveling a lot. Like, so, again, so I told you life was very good for us, and in Winnipeg. So we made a lot of trips, out of Canada, and which counts against the time
Oh, got
required
it.
to
Yeah,
uh,
to
qualify
stay on
for your
ground for the
citizenship.
citizenship.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so obviously we were permanent residents,
Yeah.
right? We landed as permanent residents. Yeah, so went to Nigeria, and she was like, okay, we can let us set up something there. So we set up something, actually a restaurant, as well as a boutique, which is a clothing store.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I told you we used to buy a lot of clothes, the shoes for sale, and then so she wanted a physical outfit, which we, and that was, largely her, endeavor, right? While I encouraged, you know, the some of those activities, my mind still wasn't, settled. My spirit was still very uneasy. I knew that, Nigeria wasn't the place for me, right?
Yeah.
I'd been
This
away.
this was what year?
This was in 2014.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
still.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so this was in 2014, right? And remember, I'd unlearned a lot of, habits
Within those
those years.
couple of
Yeah.
years that you were
So
away.
coming back, so now going back to Nigeria just to hang out, so for me it was to hang out. Yeah. Although she was hoping that we would,
Build.
build,
Yeah.
something there, whatever. But I was never really, you know, down with that, right?
Yeah.
No. So, and one day I said, look, man, I don't want to be at a place where I have to beg for everything.
Yeah.
I'm going to go back to Canada because Canada is, I say this to people, Canada is my village. I can always, if you know what you're doing in this country, right, with painstaking efforts, with tenacity, you can navigate any tide
Yeah.
as they come. So I returned back to Canada and then drove. So my car was in Toronto and some of my things had moved. So when we moved out of that, apartment, some of the items were moved to my very close friend's, house.
Yeah.
And, my car was parked there. So he helped us a lot, back then and whatever. So I went back to Toronto, hung out for a bit and drove, to Winnipeg.
Oh, you
Because-
did a drive from
Toronto
to Winnipeg.
to Winnipeg.
That's a long drive.
Yeah. Going, so it's I mean, if you drive through the US,
Yeah.
right,
Okay. Okay.
yeah,
you
it's
had-
24 hours, right?
Okay.
But if you stay within Canada, it's way more. You might even be doing 30 hours. Right?
Yeah.
So I went, back to Winnipeg, and that was during the World Cup of 2014. So hung out for a couple of weeks in Winnipeg, used that time to inspect my house, our house, because we okay, I didn't mention we bought a house in Winnipeg
Okay.
before we moved and put some tenants in there, so made sure the house is good or whatever. But the plan was to move to Calgary, which I did. So again, I drove to Calgary. At this time, my wife and kid,
Winnipeg. You drove to Calgary.
I drove to Calgary. I didn't know anybody, although I had a cousin there, in Calgary, but I wasn't, in touch,
Okay.
with her, right? So moved. So again, it's Canada, right? So I then there was nothing like Airbnb, but there were people who advertised that place online,
Yeah.
for short stays, right? So I found some place, a one bedroom, which I paid the lady $600 a month. There, I was only there for 1 month, by the way, and found another place which was more, convenient for me because, I mean, I'm a man with family, right? So everything I did, was with my family in mind. And then, so settled in pretty quickly, brought my family back, and the rest was history, right? Yeah. Yeah.
So that's like a lot of Jakpa stories.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
So you
And
guys-
based on certain decisions,
Yeah.
which I made.
You had to make those decisions.
Yeah.
Because you saw that things were not working,
Mm-hmm.
and then made a decision to move back
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
This is almost like I would call it almost like the third Jakpa trip, because the first from Nigeria
Yeah,
to
to
London,
London.
from London to
Winnipeg,
from Winnipeg to Toronto, back to
Nigeria, and then
Nigeria
back.
to
Yeah.
Calgary.
Yes. It's a Calgary.
Wow.
Yes. Yeah.
That's quite
Yeah.
quite a journey.
Yeah.
Like, and sometimes you make certain decisions and you reassess. And
Absolutely.
if it's not working, I think what I've personally learned is if you want to fail fast, learn from it and then move. Pivot from
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
and identify what works.
Yeah.
And like you said, nothing is keeping you in a particular city.
No.
Right? You have the flexibility to move around.
Move, where the opportunities are. Right?
Yeah. Because sometimes there's more opportunities in different cities than others.
Yeah.
And if that city is clapping, then
Then you
definitely
go
wanna be
dance to
there.
it. Yeah. Yes.
So, when you came to Calgary, what was your first experience if you had to compare that with the different cities that you had been to? What was your first impression about?
Oh, I loved Calgary. Okay, so it wasn't my first time in Calgary, by the way.
Okay,
I'd
okay.
visited Calgary once. I forget why. I can't remember. Yes. I think I came to Calgary the first time I came to Calgary was in 2012 to apply for my US, I think to attend my US visa interview.
Okay.
Yes. And I was like, this is a very nice place. I wish I landed here first.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what came to mind, but brushed it off or whatever, because we were good in Winnipeg, right? In Manitoba. Yeah. So coming to Calgary, it was an instant hit for me. And that was the same 2014, right? Summer 2014 is when I came to Calgary. And in 9 days, I got a job.
That's fast. Yeah.
Oh yeah, very fast. So Calgary, unlike Toronto,
Yeah.
recognized and accepted my skills and work experience or whatever.
Right.
You get it. So I came and I landed the job in the
So was that really more from a Western side of things?
Oh,
or
it's
like
possible.
because the provinces are close,
very
like
similar.
Manitoba is
Yeah,
probably
it's one of the prairie regions, right?
It's
Yeah.
in the prairie and stuff. So
Yeah.
because almost like once you go to the East Coast, then it's things are like completely
Yeah.
different.
Yes.
East Coast, West Coast, and some certifications that you have, apart from the very international certifications.
Yeah.
That when you have it, irrespective of where you are, it's applicable.
Yes.
But some of those other ones that are like state specific or province specific.
Yeah.
I'm surprised that there wasn't a lot of hustle pushing back on what you had from Manitoba.
Yeah.
in
So
Alberta.
in fact, just to take us back a bit,
Yeah.
when we were getting ready to leave Toronto, a company that had applied to 6 months prior contacted me, and I said, "Oh, you're already too late." We're like, "Oh, you know what? Just give us a chance, right?" Okay, that's fine. So this was a phone interview, and I was able to, elaborate on my experience and what I can bring. But yeah, do you know they try to talk me out of my trip, out of Toronto. Because the lady couldn't believe what she was hearing. That, wow, you're exactly who we're looking for, right? Because you remember, I was already, I was a manager, and I was also someone, as a manager from Winnipeg, and also someone who was providing services as a contractor. as an independent contractor, right? So but it was already too late. We had already, we were disillusioned at that time, yeah.
There was no turning
There
back.
was no turning back, So now Calgary, it was an instant hit. You get,
So I'm sure with that alone, it's welcoming
Yeah.
from a decision perspective. It's just like that little notch that you need to say, "Oh, I think I made the right decision."
Yeah.
The city is warm. It welcomed me once. Immediately I got in,
Yeah.
and I got a job that I
Yeah.
could start.
Yes. Remember, I have, oil and gas experience, right? From Nigeria.
From Nigeria.
Yes. So, but then people said to me, why are you coming now? Because Canada was already, the oil and gas sector was already experiencing, a recession at the time.
Yeah.
So I couldn't get into the oil and gas industry, but the low hanging fruit of something I already knew, like, back of my palms, was that providing, services, to, the vulnerable sector. Yeah. So I did that. Then, after some years, I transitioned to IT. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So switch between health. I think health has been constant.
Yeah.
In the picture.
Yes.
It's like it's something that has always worked, irrespective, apart from the challenges in Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
But moving back to Calgary, health was still
And
like
still is.
that.
And still is.
It was and it is.
Yes, because there was a time when my friends, the people I connected with here,
Yeah.
who were working in the oil and gas, industry, were out of work, and I was the only one working. Right, still working. In fact, I was able to get a couple of them into the healthcare space by showing them what to do. I identified the trainings and education that they needed to get into the space. Right.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
So that was with your experience previously. A lot of folks, because I know with the oil thing that happened back then in Alberta, it really rocked a lot of boats in terms
time.
of folks that had jobs in the oil industry.
Yeah.
So with that support from a health perspective,
Yeah.
most people were like at least being able to pay certain bills for themselves.
Oh yeah, 100%, 100%. And I saw it happen, like in a negative, sense for
Yeah.
people who were very well, self-reliant. They started to struggle. Some, a couple close friends of mine, you get, and even my own brother, the hammer eventually came down on him, right? Right? So which, informed his decision to pivot, right?
Yeah.
You get- so- And it's kind of like maybe life lesson, or it's part of nature, where sometimes for you to get to the next level, you need to go through a very difficult, path
Yeah.
or patch. I don't know if you're familiar with the story of the lobster. For the lobster to grow bigger, it needs to break out of its current shell.
Yeah.
And for it to survive that process, it must go to the bottom of the ocean and hide under a rock, or else he'll be vulnerable. Because at that time, it's vulnerable.
Yeah.
You see, but if it can survive that brutal, period in time, it's gonna build a new shell.
Yeah.
And come out bigger and stronger. Yeah.
I like that because I think for most people, like the challenges that you're gonna face will be completely inevitable, right? You could get it one time, some other times you could hit a roadblock or a glass ceiling. You have to just understand that you're there for a purpose. You have to keep moving. Learn from other people who are doing something the right way or where things seem to be working. Pivot from there as quickly as possible and move on.
100%.
When you think about, what are some of the things from home that you would say you miss the most? Because sometimes living in different cities abroad
Yeah.
or living in different places, there are probably some things that are, you never experience it the same way than when you go back home. So for you, what would you say would be some of those things?
I think I would say the biggest shock for me when I moved out to the UK, then Canada, was the tax system.
Okay.
And that is because, you know, the tax system is tiered, into different brackets, of which the more you earn, the more you pay.
Yep.
So that was like a major shock for me. It doesn't mean I didn't pay taxes while working in Nigeria, but it was quite, you know, negligible or something like
Yeah.
that. Yeah. So that was the biggest shock, to think that you'll pay very high taxes and still have to. So it's two things: the tax system and the rent or mortgage system here. So one thing that I wish could change is like the reviewing, the tax system should be reviewed, knowing that the cost of living is astronomically high. You pay a lot of, so from source, as a on T4, T4 is an employee, tax, format or whatever. You still have to go pay heavily
Yeah.
towards your rent and bills. So those are the major things. So I've been able to build a very strong and diverse connection here in Canada. Both in Calgary, I have people, I have a lot of friends and family. I have 3 siblings, brothers in Calgary who joined me here, you know, years ago up to last year.
Yeah.
And I have, friends and cousins in Toronto, and the US, right? So the aspect of, so I don't miss, family here because I have family and friends there. What I wish was different, and that's what I miss, right? Is being able to have more disposable income in Canada.
Yeah, because it's almost like everything is routing through the tax system, which I mean, very similar to that. When you earn, you get taxed from the source.
Yeah.
When you go to pick up groceries, of
still
course
pay
you get
tax.
taxed. When you're doing any other transactions, you're still
Paying
taxed.
tax. And
Right,
then
so-
on top of it, and on top of it, you still have to pay heavily towards, rent. So you're
Oh, yeah.
literally, you know, paying through your nose to breathe, to take air into the same nostrils. So like it's, I just think it's
A little bit too much.
it's too much, so one needs, a lot of grit and, strength
Yeah.
to be able to survive out here. People back home don't get it. Those who haven't lived outside of Nigeria, lived in the Western world, because it's not different than, even, Spain or, or France, because I have people there, or Australia. I have family in Australia as well. It's the same system.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So that's one thing to think about. So while, again, in the spirit of Jakpa, people should think of that. You need to, in fact, when you come out here, you must, whether you're coming from Nigeria or wherever you're coming from, but in the case of Nigeria, you should press Control Alt Delete Nigeria for you to fully integrate
Yeah.
and excel in this place.
Yeah, I think it's very important to just have that mind shift. It's almost like what I usually call a paradigm shift, where you're you have certain thoughts, but you need to start thinking in a completely new way and new direction.
Fact.
Because it's almost like what the Bible says, like pouring old wine in new wine skin, and then you're expecting that same
Taste
that
or
same sweet
sweet
taste from it.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yes.
like that, the mindset shift is so important because it helps you move a lot faster and it helps you really understand the way the system works so that you start doing things right the very first time.
Absolutely.
I'll ask you a few questions,
Okay.
just to soften things a little
Yeah.
bit,
Yeah.
because I know you've been going back to back
Yeah.
on your Jakpa journey.
Yes.
Now, these sort of questions, when you hear it, I want you to just tell me which one makes sense to you.
Okay.
Accent change,
Okay.
keep it or lose it.
Well, again, it depends on where you find yourself.
Okay.
I know a few people who moved out here years ago and were harbored by Caucasians.
Okay.
And I'm talking about people who were already adults. Because as an adult, your voice box, I don't know the medical term, is already locked. You can only try to, sling and sound like, the white man or the Caucasians or the core Canadians, people who were born here or whatever.
Yeah.
Or you think you sound like them, but you actually don't. So the best thing, so those people I mentioned, I actually have been able to, because the environment they found themselves was one which that was the only thing they interacted with,
Yeah.
right? But then you have others who come here and all of a sudden they're trying to sound like, the white man. They're trying to lose their accent.
Yeah.
I don't think that's real. That's you lying to yourself,
Yeah.
right? So especially when they're around their own, kind,
Like,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, like you and I cannot be communicating and I'm trying to, sling, for you. What am I? You'll be,
So what did
yeah,
you say?
you'll say to me, you probably in your head, you'll say to me, you having a laugh or something like that, so keep it and be natural, right? But try to pronounce words the correct way
Yeah.
so you can be understood. That way you can. So try to communicate clearly because I know people who are top professionals here, top bankers, lawyers, doctors, and they sound exactly Nigerian and highly respected, and their services are constantly being, needed.
Yeah.
Or accessed. Yeah. So keep it real.
I like
Yeah.
that. And I like your perspective about it.
Yeah.
This other one, when it comes to traveling,
Yeah.
Airbnb or hotels.
Again, it depends on what your poison is. So
No, for you.
for me,
Yeah.
okay, for me, for
Like,
me,
which
okay,
one makes sense for you?
if I'm traveling by myself,
Yeah.
please put me in a hotel, baby. There's a reason why hotels charge what they charge, especially the 5-star ones.
Yeah.
Is the experience. And that is how I approach life. That's how I approach people. I connect, what do you want to be remembered for or remembered by when you're gone? That is why when you're leaving a hotel, you say, come visit us again. Or how was our stay? How was the experience? How was your stay, rather? Right? So for me, hotel place. But if you're with family, by all means, Airbnb.
Okay.
So there's,
Okay.
family with kids, right? so there's enough space for the children to play, because an Airbnb, like a house, may have a backyard or at least a front porch, but as against the hotel, which you're confined, which confines you to your room, or then maybe you go to the poolside if they have one and all of that, But if you're traveling by yourself or with a significant other, by all means, please go sleep in a very nice hotel.
Don't think too
Thank
much
you.
about anything
No,
else.
no, there's no two ways about it. Yeah.
Okay, I appreciate that perspective.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, and this other one, 9 to 5 or entrepreneurship.
Well, all different as human beings. So, some people do not have what it takes to be an entrepreneur. Some people do not have the will to execute. In fact, I've been an entrepreneur, for years, and I can tell you that entrepreneurship is actually more challenging and comes with a lot of, what struggles, right? Yeah, and can render you poor if you don't get it right.
That's very true.
In fact, 9 to 5 entrepreneurship. So again, you have to decide what you really want for yourself, and if you're ready for that smoke, for that fight, because entrepreneurship is 247, while 9 to 5 is 9 to 5.
That's a great perspective from
Yes.
because I read this funny. I think it was one of those funny videos where you see, and I think a lady was dating an entrepreneur,
Yeah.
and she made a video and she was talking to other ladies, and she was like, "Hey, if you're dating an entrepreneur, you better get ready to be everything to him.
Yes.
You have to be his nurse, you have to be his cook, you have to be his psychologist, you have to be like you're providing end-to-end support, right? And what you said, it's 24/7. And folks that are doing 9 to 5, for a lot of folks who are doing 9 to 5, most of them are also thinking about how to get to do something for themselves, since they know they're not going to be working for forever
Yes.
for other people. But I respect your perspective about it, because really understanding that difference. A lot of folks get burned when they quickly drop their 9 to 5 and jump on the entrepreneurship without doing a lot of research, understanding the way their market works.
Exactly.
And then when things start failing, then they have to try to go get another 9 to 5. So I think, for me, I think it's just something that needs to be approached carefully and with a lot of planning.
Yeah.
Do a lot of proof of concepts, test small, expand your testing, make sure the results are looking the way you expect it to, and then before you drop that ball to jump on that ship.
And I will add that you have to be ready to take a punch in the face.
Oh yeah,
And this is
100%.
This is a proverbial, punch. You have to be ready to weather the storm,
yeah,
and you have to be willing to look yourself in the mirror and ask yourself that difficult question: who am I?
yeah.
Really? Because when those challenges come, it can blow you out of the way. And if you're not careful, if you're not made of depth and steel, you might end up
It might break
you
you.
might end up on the streets.
Yeah,
Not because you lost your house, no, but because you've lost your mind.
yeah.
Yeah, so you have to be very, very ready. And hey, there is nothing wrong with doing a 9 to 5, even if it's just enough to pay your bills. The most important thing is your mental state, your mental health.
Yeah.
Right? You want to be able to gain some level of stability. So, because it's all about stability. Why, as a matter of fact, why do we wake up in the morning and go out, or in the case of working remotely, turn on our computers to do the things we do? because we want to maintain a lifestyle of sufficiency than lack, want, and need, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So ask yourself that question: who am I? What can I really do? Is this me? Am I an imposter? Am I trying to do what someone else is doing? Because, see, do not give in to the pressures because of life or because Mr. B is doing this, I and Mr. A must do it. No, you get, because you may have the best business plan, you may have the best strategy and strategists. The market will tell you, right? The market will determine, and obviously your approach too.
Yeah.
And then finally you have to be willing and ready to fail.
I think that failure part is the part where a lot of folks are not usually ready for it, because you believe so much in your product or whatever service that you're rendering that you don't really consider the full extent of the picture.
Yeah.
Because as much as you want it to work, there's also a possibility that the market might not receive it the way you expect it to.
Absolutely.
And if the market does not receive it the way you expect it to, what do you do from there? How do you pivot from there?
How do you pivot from there?
You know, how do you even get to a point where you're like, you know what? I did my best. I did everything I'm supposed to do.
100%.
Let me protect my mental health and, focus on driving other things forward.
And also to maintain, and also be stable because you're an adult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that stability, for me, stability has always been very key,
Very key.
because you get to a particular phase in life where you just want to make sure that irrespective of whatever decisions you're taking, whatever investments you're making, whatever moves that you're making for an entrepreneurial journey, you want to make sure that you see that base, that lifestyle that you're currently living. You don't want to do anything that just impacts it drastically.
Exactly.
So it's like trying to make sure the lifestyle stays the way it is, while still taking some risk and trying to expand, here and there.
Yeah, like my older brother would say, baby steps.
Yeah.
Stay humble, stay foolish.
I like that. Stay humble and stay foolish.
Shout out to Captain Edom. Yeah.
Stay humble and stay foolish.
Yeah.
Because I think that's the only way you get to really learn.
Yeah.
And that's the way you get to hear other people's perspective about stuff that you're about to embark on. And then you hear that and you make your decision, a very informed decision.
Absolutely. Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
So, and then we have a tradition on the podcast where the previous guest leaves a question for the next guest. And fortunately, I don't get to read the question until you're seated right here.
Okay.
So it's that time, and I'll let you pick up our Jakpa Stories book where you have all the questions.
Okay.
Open it, go to the last question, and then read it out. And answer the question.
Oh, okay. So I believe it's this one, right?
Yeah, that one.
Okay. What advice would I give to my younger self?
That's a very good one. What advice would you give to your younger self? So if you were to pick an age for your younger self, what age would you pick?
I ask myself this question all the time, or rather, I wish I did this as a young person back in the day. I wish I learned how to code from a younger age.
How to code.
working on computers, because interestingly, our dad sent my brother and I, the captain, and even my brother Neji, of course, some of the viewers may know him, went to that same school and even started teaching there later on.
Interesting.
Yeah. A computer school, computer learning school. I had a diploma in basic computer programming. As an, I was, I think I was 17,
Okay.
but I never really followed through.
So your dad was definitely looking ahead of the game.
Yes.
And like he also had his own Canadian
Oh,
experience.
yes. Yeah, dad
Right?
was living in Canada. Yeah. No,
So he was definitely looking ahead of the game and wanting you guys to key into that.
yes, which is contrary to his own profession as a top mechanical and civil engineer.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So I think what he was trying to do was, get us to do something that was practically highly skilled.
Yeah. Because irrespective, like
Yeah,
no matter what's going on in the world right now,
yeah,
I know right now AI is doing a
Yes.
whole lot. With AI, folks that probably never knew anything with coding
yeah.
are still leveraging that for, to build apps and
apps and
everything.
all that, for
But I
deliverables,
think
yeah.
the backbone and that foundation, when it comes to being a developer, being, someone that knows how to code,
Yeah.
that foundational skill set is still very, very
it's
applicable.
Extremely, in fact, it's invaluable. Man.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
I agree.
So that's the advice I would say. So I would say I still say it till date to my younger self. I wish you, because I would have been way better, today in what I am doing. But at least today, I'm thankful that I'm doing what I'm doing now. But I wish, because maybe I would have, come up with, something to do, which we
one
try
of-
to do anyway. You
One
get
of those
yeah.
applications.
Yes, one of those applications that's providing real value to people.
Yeah.
But although now, I support, working with an implementation partner in ServiceNow. I support the delivery of, certain, implementations and,
How's that going so far?
yes, yeah, so far so good. Yeah, so as a ServiceNow developer, I get to, translate those, ideas and requirements into, business outcomes, for my clients. Yeah.
I like that. Good. So if you were to advise your younger self, you would still advise him to, hey, you better go take this coding thing serious.
Yes, take coding things
because it's an
seriously, yeah.
invaluable skill.
Yes, because yes, yeah, absolutely.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. So for those of you out there, if you're listening, I think if you're considering coding or software development, I think it's still a very lucrative path.
Yeah.
Go take courses. I think right now, even on LinkedIn and what's the other one?
LinkedIn Learning,
Coursera, Udemy.
and
There's a
all that.
lot.
Even the ServiceNow,
Yeah.
Now learning platform
Yes.
is an open university for anybody to go learn something.
Yeah.
So, but you want to start with the basics of knowing the system. So, system administrator. Yeah. So it's called a certified system administrator.
Yeah.
ServiceNow administration program or something like that. Yeah. So yeah. So, but it doesn't have to be ServiceNow. It could be anything. Just learn, how to apply your skills towards real life situations, because you can also be a product owner. Learn how to. In fact, now today you want to learn how, to either learn how to build large language models, LLMs, which is AI, and or know how to use them and use them efficiently and effectively. Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
So it's your turn now.
Yeah.
I'll give you some time to leave a question for the next guest.
Okay.
And once you're done, then I have a few more.
Questions.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So,
So
I
feel
gotta
free to,
write it
yes,
down.
you
Yeah,
can
okay.
do that right
Okay.
now.
All right. Oh, by the way, I like this book. Yeah.
Thank you.
Very good.
Yeah. We're trying to make sure Jakpa Stories is
Jakpa Stories. Yes. It's pretty good. Yeah. Okay. 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 You don't have to say
got it?
right?
No,
Yeah,
I
okay.
never
You
I
never,
I
okay.
never read it.
Yes.
The only I like seeing the surprise on
People's faces.
people's
right?
faces when they
Yeah.
get to read the question.
Okay. Very good. Yeah.
Yeah. So another thing I've always been very curious about, because as a health professional, you get to come across different individuals.
Yeah.
Now I want us to focus this on from an immigrant perspective,
Great.
whether it's the person going through that or you observing that as an immigrant.
Yeah.
Are there certain struggles for people out here in North America, which, especially for immigrants, that you feel people don't talk about enough, but is actually a challenge out there, which most people would probably never be too comfortable to talk about it. But sometimes, especially being a social person,
Yeah.
you probably have observed a couple of those from time to time.
Facts. And it's pretty simple. Mental health awareness.
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, we come from a place where people are easily stigmatized and sometimes victimized for presenting as one who is mentally unstable.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm of the opinion that a lot of people out there in Nigeria, Ghana, a lot of the African countries, and other black dominated nations around the world, because there's one thing that is consistent with a lot of these black nations, which is poverty, subsistence, which is abject poverty, nepotism, security issues, and economic underdevelopment. It is very consistent with black dominated nations. And I attribute it to poor mental health state. Because think about it. The problem we have in Nigeria, which I can speak about, is leadership. And in my opinion, the people leading us are highly mentally unstable. Because you have to be at a level of mental instability to not have empathy for your people,
Yeah.
where you are you're charged with the responsibility of administration, of leadership, yet you cut away with the resources that are under your control, thereby leaving the people who are working or who are citizens within the economy, or who are supposed to help you drive that economy, leaving them stranded pretty much. What is the resultant effect of that? Obviously, crime. In fact, agitation, mental health, relapse. Because when a man wakes up in the morning and he's unable to feed his family, or he goes to work in the public sector and you don't pay him at the end of the month, what do you think will happen to him? So again, so these are some of the things that I think people do not realize or talk about enough, and it's the reason why a lot of us come out here and still exhibit some of those traits, because they do not realize that they have this, they are undiagnosed. So people need to come here and have a complete evaluation or complete overhaul of their mindsets.
And what's the best way to encourage people to do that for someone who is listening that is probably thinking about it, like, okay, you know what, I'm in a new, either I just immigrated or I just landed, or I'm probably trying to just navigate things. What are some tips that you can give some of those folks to like navigate some of those challenges?
Yes, you want to be able to be open enough to speak to someone. If you identify, although some people are either in denial, they are shy, or they are outright arrogant, right? But be willing and open to speak to a professional or a friend whom you believe can support you. So that is something that I do, because I have a very high level of self-awareness and emotional intelligence, and it's through training myself and then understanding mental health, because I've studied mental health and the Mental Health Act and all of that, because I'm fascinated about the human mind. I like to call myself a psychologist without the certification. It is great to, and again, so trust is an integral, part of the is a recipe, that you must, have, throw into the mix, where, like, divine, I trust you to come to you. We've had very good personal conversations, right? And I know that you would candidly tell me the truth, which is to look inwards. So my advice to people is, speak to someone and you have to look inwards. Be ready to break yourself. You should always come with a contrite heart where you're willing to take advice, take that positive criticism. So some people, again, we do not know what people's backgrounds are, what their story is, or what their experiences are, or some of the forums they belong to and all of that. Because, some people are, I call them a walking bag of traumas, right? You get unresolved traumas, which they are not willing to maybe go speak to a professional, or at least somebody who understands these things. You get, and they're also not willing to make a real change. Yeah.
And do you think sometimes there's a stigma that is attached to it?
Yes, sometimes it is
makes
that.
people not to be open and willing to talk about some of those mental health issues.
Yes, that's, and the not acknowledging that there's a problem.
There's a problem in the first place.
Yeah.
So acknowledging that, there's an issue that needs to be addressed. And sometimes also dealing with the stigma that could be coming with that. And then just being open to go speak with someone.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I agree with that, because mental health is a real thing. It's not something that should be downplayed, because a lot of people are navigating that in different ways. But speaking with a professional definitely helps you get a lot of tips, a lot of advice on how to navigate certain things.
Yes.
And it's not limited to just one particular area.
Yes.
I think, the more people have like that open-mindedness and are willing to talk about certain things that are difficult, I think that's the first step towards getting solutions to
100%,
it.
100%. Or else, how are we gonna grow
Yeah.
significantly?
I agree.
Yes. Yeah.
For someone who is thinking about immigrating or jackberrying in quotes, I want you to speak directly to that person.
Yeah.
You know, we've gone through your journey between navigating your jackpot journey
Yeah.
from Nigeria to London, from London to Manitoba, Manitoba to Toronto, Toronto back to Nigeria, Nigeria back to Manitoba, Manitoba to Calgary.
Yeah.
That's a lot of experience
Yes.
right there.
Yes.
Now, I want you to speak to someone who is thinking of immigrating or someone who just immigrated,
Good.
whether they decided to go to the UK, to Canada, to US, but they're just getting into the system.
Yeah.
You know, you're someone who is a very social person as well.
Yeah.
And I think your social skills has really helped connect some dots for you.
100%.
So for someone like that that is just getting in or thinking about immigrating, what are some words that you would leave with that person that would really help them through the phases that they have ahead?
Yeah. So first of all, you must have a plan. From the first day you harbor the thought of leaving whatever country that is to a new place like Canada, you must ask yourself, what am I gonna go do there? It's not just to say, hey, I'm jackpotting from like, no boy, I don't jackpot.
You get a visa and you just
I start celebrating.
tick
No, it's
off.
not just that.
Yeah.
You know, it's like buying a very nice car, enjoying it, but then you have to keep it on the road.
Yeah.
So what are you going to do? That should be top of your list. So you must have a strategy. You must have a plan. What sells out there? And today we're blessed with multiple media where you can get information. There's TikTok. I've met someone who said all her searches are on TikTok.
Oh, interesting.
TikTok is Google for her. I found that super interesting, but hey, it works for her.
That's a brilliant
Yeah.
perspective.
I never. So again, you see, that's why we should be open to learning.
Yeah,
And all
yeah.
that. Yeah. So you must have a plan. Look at what sells out there where I'm going to. That should be the question. And you research, you book time, on people's schedules to say, hey, I want to have a chat, because just to back up some of the information you may have received or seen online, talk to people who are on ground, people who are doing things and making significant changes in their community, because Canada is all about one of the rights and responsibilities of a Canadian citizen, whether you're even a permanent resident, is to be responsible to your family, yourself, and your community. In fact, I think it's in the order of your family, your community, and yourself. Right? So you want to associate, you want to talk to people who are already living here, who can be, a guide for you. You can pick their brain. You can. This is Jakpa Stories. You can reach out to Divine. I'm pretty sure maybe he has an email or so, on his Instagram, page, or so you could reach out to him. I'm sure Divine will be very happy to lend you some time. And any other person, you deem fit, right? That within your circle. Talk to someone and come here and double down on that thing, whether it's an education or training certificate. Or then also look for good groups when you're here, or even back where you are. Look for, because there are a group of people, there are organizations out there now that have programs where they are creating awareness, about these subjects, right? You get, look for those things. And for those who are here, do not be afraid to pivot when you fail. You pivot, you re-strategize. Be open to questions. Look for communities and forums and networks that you can be a part of. I have an interesting story for you, Divine. I met someone recently, a female, who was introduced to me, and so it turned out that person was new to Canada, and so in the course of our conversation, the next day, it wasn't even that day. The first day it was just about, hey, how, just getting to know very high level. So the next day when we got talking, over the phone, I asked her, so what do you do? And she got mad.
Or she got mad for you asking her, what do you do?
I was taken aback. I'm like, she was like, is that the first question you ask somebody?
Interesting. Like, what's wrong with asking someone what they do?
I have no idea. But so I then asked, my question back to her was, is there a template to the
To
type
how
of
you get
question
to know
that,
someone.
I get to ask you, in my mind, this is not the first time where I interacted. But again, I understood with them, or I tried to understand with her, because I do not know what her story is.
Yeah.
I don't know her background. Again, that comes from me. So immediately I put on my professional hat. So today I'm a ServiceNow developer and implementation specialist. But same time, I still, because of my fascination about the human mind and empathy, I love to help. I still work part-time in the healthcare space.
Okay.
So I understood with her. And long and short was that I said, okay, apparently it's not a good time for you, and I just
Because at that moment she's probably dealing with something.
So
right?
her question, yes. So it was probably a trigger for her.
Yeah.
Because she asked me. She was like, why do Canadian guys always ask that question?
Which means it's not the first
Yes,
experience for her.
so-
And maybe she had an experience where something went wrong.
Yeah.
Maybe a guy ghosted her after learning what she was doing.
or it could also be because again, I mean, sorry to say, a lot of our, people, both
Yeah.
male and female, have this, entitlement mentality.
Yeah.
You get, so, and it's different out here. You have to be responsible for yourself as well. So it was probably a touchy subject for her, right?
I believe
so
so.
again, those are all assumptions, right? And I didn't want to dwell on it, and I ended the conversation, right? But I thought that was a missed opportunity for her, because I could have told her about ServiceNow.
Oh, yeah.
Because from the look of things, from the little information I gathered, even though she was new in Canada, she's a professional back in Nigeria. She already, I'm not going to say what, she's doing already here.
Yeah.
But obviously it's not in her field of study.
Okay.
Right. But I thought that was a missed opportunity for her, because I could have given her information. She didn't know who I was, really. Yet, so again, it goes back to what I'm saying. You need to be open to questions, suggestions, right? Because think about it, when you go for, you attend networking events or professional, conferences or whatever, people will always ask you a question. One, to maybe do some sort of evaluation or just to know who you are, and then possibly suggest, great ideas that could turn, things around and move the needle for you, right?
No, I think being open-minded is
100%.
very important, because you never know who you're going to run into, and you never know who is talking to you, right?
100%,
And I think a lot of people that have come across actually want to help out one way or the other, and networking is one of the ways which you get to connect with other people.
Facts.
People get to understand where you are, where you want to go to, and you may just be talking to the person who could open that door where you're going to. So let's stay open-minded. Ene Tao, or Ene boy.
Divine.
Really appreciate you
Thank you very much.
being here on Jakpa Stories.
yeah.
I think you've shared some really important
Yeah.
nuggets with folks out there, in different parts of their journey, which they're going to find very beneficial. I think top for me was mental health, really picking on that, because a lot of people are going through different things. Now, the way the community here is built up, the society, it's always built up in just making you to be on your own. And you go to work, you come back, get into your house, mind your business. The next day you rinse and repeat. So
100%.
connecting with people is very intentional. You have to be
Yes.
very intentional about it.
Yes.
So really very grateful for you to share that.
Yeah, thank you.
And once again, appreciate you for being here on Jakpa
Thank you.
Stories.
Thank you so
And
much.
looking forward to having you again.
My pleasure.